Iris swept into my office announcing, "From now on, she reports directly to me," while stealing my 20-year career. Then I found her real plan in the archives. I called the board meeting and watched her world crumble. I stood frozen as Iris swept into my workspace, her entourage of executives trailing behind her like obedient ducklings. 23 years old with a business degree still warm from the printer, while I'd spent double that time building our client portfolio from nothing into a $47 million revenue stream. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce Mona, who'll be handling our legacy accounts," she announced, gesturing toward me as if presenting an outdated office printer. "From now on, she reports directly to me." The room went silent. Nobody looked at me. Not Trent from legal, not Kip from accounting, not even Darlene, who'd shared lunch with me every Wednesday for a decade. They studied their shoes, tablet screens, anything but my face. "We need fresh energy in the European markets," our CEO Gerald said, his hand on Iris's shoulder. "Mona can help you understand our history while you lead us forward." I was being turned into history while still breathing. My mind immediately shifted into analytical mode, the same strategic thinking that had saved 3 major client relationships during the 2019 recession and personally generated $8 million in new business last year alone. This wasn't random corporate restructuring. This was calculated. "The corner desk will be yours," Iris told me, pointing to a cramped space near the supply closet. "I need this office cleared by lunch." My office, my space that had witnessed countless late nights and breakthroughs. The wall still displayed the thank you letter from our biggest client after I'd saved their campaign during Hurricane Maria, working 72 straight hours to relocate their entire European launch remotely. That single save had protected $12 million in revenue. "Understood," I replied, my voice steadier than my hands. But inside, I was already calculating. 22 years of institutional knowledge, personal relationships with every major client, access to financial data going back to our founding. Iris had just made her first strategic error. She thought my value was tied to an office and a title. 3 hours later, I watched maintenance workers carry my achievement plaques in cardboard boxes, while Iris directed the placement of abstract art on my former walls. "The bulky desk goes too," she instructed them. "It's positively ancient." The desk my team had gifted me after we won Company Achievement of the Year in 2019. My new workspace had a wobbly chair and a computer that wheezed when starting up, but I wasn't focusing on the humiliation. I was processing information. My phone rang. Howie, my direct report for 8 years. "Mona, I'm sorry, but Iris has called a team meeting in the Willow Room." "When?" I asked. Right now. She said it's just for the team leads." I was being excluded from a meeting with my own team. "No problem." I lied, already planning my next move. After hanging up, I noticed an email from Iris to the entire department. Growth, strategy, implementation, moving beyond outdated methods. Attached was a 16-page presentation. I opened it and felt my breath catch. These weren't just similar ideas to what I'd proposed 6 months ago. These were my exact proposals, down to the specific market penetration targets for Portugal and Greece. The same proposals Gerald had deemed too ambitious when I presented them. Word for word, slide for slide, even using my proprietary client analysis framework that had taken me 3 years to develop. A sticky note appeared on my desk at my office, 5 p.m. sharp, Iris. I found her leaning against my old desk, tapping away on her phone. "Sit," she said without looking up. I remained standing. In my experience as Senior Director of International Growth, standing maintained psychological advantage during confrontations. She finally looked up. "Your European strategy proposal was well received in the executive meeting today." "Do you mean my European strategy?" I asked calmly. Her smile didn't waver. Your research was useful groundwork, certainly, but groundwork isn't architecture, Mona. I've modernized and elevated your basic concepts into something actionable. You copied my work word for word in some sections. That's a serious accusation, she replied, setting her phone down. Especially from someone in your position. My position? People who've been at one company too long often grow territorial, change-resistant. Gerald understands this transition might be difficult for you. The threat was clear, but Iris had revealed something crucial. Gerald was already being influenced against me. This wasn't just about reorganization. This was systematic. We're restructuring the department next month, she continued. Some roles will be eliminated, others will evolve. Your future here depends entirely on your ability to adapt. Is there anything else? I asked quietly. Yes, the Winterman presentation tomorrow. I'll handle it. The Winterman Group. My client for 16 years. Their CEO, Oliver, had specifically requested me for their annual review of our $3 million contract. Oliver specifically asked for me to present. I spoke with Oliver this morning. He understands the new direction. She was systematically stripping away everything I'd built, my role, my relationships, my reputation, but she was also making mistakes, big ones. That evening, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to friends or family. Instead, I opened my personal laptop and began working on a file that would change everything. See, Iris had made a critical assumption. She thought my power came from my title, my office, my direct reports. She hadn't realized my real power came from 22 years of watching, listening, and remembering, from relationships built on trust rather than intimidation, from knowing exactly how our company functioned at every level. I pulled out my external hard drive, the one where I'd backed up every project, every email, every presentation for the past 15 years. Not for this moment specifically, but because I'd always believed in protecting institutional knowledge. What I found as I searched through those archives made my hands tremble. I worked through the night, cross-referencing financial records, merger documents, and personnel files. By morning, I had compiled something that revealed the true scope of what was happening. My name is Mona Teller, and I'd been Senior Director of International Growth at Meridian Marketing since I was 24. I'd personally opened 7 of our 11 international offices. When Bella's mother was diagnosed with cancer, I'd rearranged her entire work schedule for treatments. When Penn's apartment flooded, I'd helped him find temporary housing. When Howie struggled with his first major presentation, I'd stayed late for a week straight until he could deliver it flawlessly. I knew their children's names, their anniversaries, their dreams beyond our company walls. Iris knew none of this. To her, they were resources to be optimized, pieces on a chessboard. During her second week, she'd called Howie into her office. He emerged an hour later, avoiding eye contact with me. The next day, he presented his new approach to Nordic markets, an approach I'd been privately mentoring him on for months. The same pattern repeated with Bella's digital architecture improvements and Penn's client retention model. She asked about your management style, Darlene whispered during our now awkward Wednesday lunch. If you micromanage, take credit for others' work, resist innovation. What did you say? I asked. Darlene looked down at her salad. I tried to be diplomatic, but Mona, she records everything. She had her phone on the table, recording our entire conversation. Iris wasn't just rewriting the present, she was revising the past. By week 3, my team stopped coming to me with questions. Emails went unanswered. Invitations to client calls disappeared from my calendar. The final blow came when Oliver from Winterman Group called me directly, confused about why I wouldn't be leading their account anymore. After 16 years, without even a handover meeting? He said. Well, We specifically requested you in our contract renewal. If you're not involved, we'll need to reconsider our options." When I raised this with Gerald, he seemed distracted. "Iris has some innovative approaches to the Winterman portfolio. Give her a chance, Mona. Change can be positive." That evening, I watched through conference room windows as Iris presented my European strategy to the executive team. My slides, my data, my conclusions, all with her name on the cover page. The executives nodded approvingly. Gerald actually applauded at the end. But instead of anger, a strange clarity washed over me. I'd been playing by rules that no longer applied. It was time to change the game entirely. The file I'd compiled revealed something that stunned even me. Iris Palmer hadn't just appeared at our company by coincidence. Her appointment followed our merger with Consolidated Corp., where she'd previously worked as a strategic consultant. But here's what made my hands shake. 3 months before her previous company declared bankruptcy, Iris had received a substantial payment from Blackstone Investment Group, the same group that later acquired their client list for pennies on the dollar. The same Blackstone Investment Group that now owned 30% of our company following the merger. I cross-referenced merger documents, SEC filings, and personnel records. The pattern was unmistakable. Iris had implemented identical strategies at her previous company, aggressive expansion targets that were mathematically impossible without sacrificing long-term client relationships, exactly what she was proposing for our Nordic markets. I arrived early the next morning before the receptionist, before the cleaning crew finished. I placed a single manila folder on Iris's desk with a simple note. "For your review, Historical Growth Strategy Outcomes." When I returned from my 8 a.m. client call, the one remaining meeting still on my calendar, something had clearly happened. People huddled in small groups, conversations stopping abruptly as I passed. Security guards stood outside the executive wing. Darlene hurried over, eyes wide. "What did you do?" I shared some historical context. I replied. "Iris ran screaming into Gerald's office 20 minutes ago. Then security came. They're all in there now. The entire executive team." I nodded calmly and headed to my small desk. The beauty of having worked in financial analysis for over 2 decades was understanding exactly how to present information in a way that demanded immediate attention from executives and legal counsel. At noon, an email arrived from Gerald's assistant. "Meeting requested, executive conference room, immediate." I found Gerald seated at the head of the table, flanked by our legal counsel, Wilma, and HR director, Janet. Iris was nowhere to be seen. "Sit down, Mona," Gerald said, his expression unreadable. I chose a seat directly across from him, placing my hands calmly on the table. "The file you left for Iris," he began. "Where did you get this information?" "From our company archives and publicly available financial records," I replied. Wilma leaned forward. "You've made extremely serious allegations." "I haven't made allegations," I corrected her. "I simply compiled data. The patterns speak for themselves." Gerald rubbed his temples. "You're claiming Iris deliberately implemented strategies at her previous company that led to their collapse, and now she's replicating those same strategies here." "The data supports that conclusion, yes." "That's absurd," Wilma interjected. "Why would anyone deliberately sabotage their own employer?" I met her gaze steadily. 3 months before her previous company declared bankruptcy, Iris received a payment of $847,000 from Blackstone Investment Group, the same group that later acquired their client list and now owns 30% of our company following the merger. Silence fell over the room. "Do you understand what you're implying?" Gerald said quietly. "I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you numbers, dates, and transactions that exist on public record." Janet cleared her throat. "Iris claims you're retaliating because of the performance improvement plan, that you fabricated this conspiracy theory." I opened my laptop. Would you like to see the original sources? I've indexed everything. Gerald's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. Wait here. When the door closed behind the three of them, I remained perfectly still. Through the glass wall, I could see them huddled with several executives I didn't recognize, likely from our parent company. 20 minutes passed before Gerald returned alone, looking 10 years older. Iris has been suspended pending investigation, he said, sinking into his chair. The Merger Oversight Committee is flying in tonight. I see. He studied me with new eyes. You've been with us for 22 years. Why didn't you come to me directly with this information? I considered my answer carefully. Would you have believed me over the rising star who promised to double our European market share in 6 months? You authorized her to place me on a performance improvement plan after 2 decades of exemplary reviews. You allowed her to dismantle my team without consultation. You applauded when she presented my strategies as her own. His silence was answer enough. What do you want, Mona, to make this right? What do you want? Your old position back? Iris's job? I almost laughed. I don't want her job. I want respect, not just for me, but for every person who builds something valuable in this company. I want leadership that values institutional knowledge alongside innovation. I want credit given where it's due. Gerald nodded slowly. That's reasonable. And I want Oliver's account back today before their contract reconsideration deadline. Done. As I left the executive floor, my phone chimed with messages from team members who'd suddenly remembered my existence. I ignored them all. That night, I received a call from Charlotte Weber, chairperson of the Merger Oversight Committee. I'd like to discuss your findings in person tomorrow morning, she said. I should inform you that Iris has retained legal counsel. She's claiming wrongful termination and defamation. Of course, Iris wouldn't go quietly. The information you compiled is concerning, but her legal team is questioning your methods and motives. In the meantime, I've asked Gerald to place you on administrative leave. Administrative leave. The same status as Iris. They'd equalized us, accuser and accused. My doorbell rang that evening. Howie stood nervously on my porch. I should have stood up for you, he blurted when I opened the door. We all should have. Is it true? He asked, following me to the kitchen. About Iris sabotaging her last company? You tell me, you worked with her presentations. Did anything strike you as odd about her growth projections? He looked down. The Nordic market targets. They're impossible without sacrificing our long-term customer relationships. I tried to tell her, but she said you'd made us too cautious. And what did you think? He hesitated. I thought maybe she was right, that maybe you had become too conservative. His honesty stung, but I appreciated it. The Oversight Committee is coming tomorrow. I've been placed on administrative leave, same as Iris. That's insane. After what you discovered, evidence can be interpreted different ways, especially when one party has powerful connections. Howie's expression hardened. Tell me what to do. How can I help? I studied his earnest face. He'd abandoned me when Iris arrived, but he'd also been the first to return. Because I've worked with you for 8 years. He continued. I know who you really are. I nodded slowly. Then that's what I need, people who know who I really are. The Oversight Committee meeting was held in our largest conference room. When I arrived, I found not just Charlotte Weber and the executives, but nearly 20 people, including Howie, Bella, Penn, and other team members. Charlotte began without pleasantries. Miss Teller, we've reviewed your file on Iris Palmer. Her legal representation has provided a response, claiming you've misrepresented data to create a false narrative due to personal animosity. Beside her sat a polished man in an expensive suit, clearly Iris's lawyer. Furthermore, they've submitted evidence that you've been resistant to necessary changes, underperforming in your role, and attempting to undermine new leadership. My heart sank. Iris had prepared for this possibility, building a case against me from day one. Before we proceed with your response, I should inform you that Iris has offered to drop potential legal action if you retract your claims and resign immediately. The lawyer slid a document across the table, a resignation letter already prepared. The room went silent, all eyes on me. I picked up the resignation letter, feeling the weight of every gaze. The expensive stationery felt heavy in my hands as I slowly scanned the document. "This is quite thorough," I remarked, my voice steady. "Prepared in advance, I assume." "We wanted to make this transition as smooth as possible," the lawyer acknowledged. "Smooth? For whom exactly?" I placed the resignation letter back on the table. "I won't be signing this." The lawyer's smile faltered. "I strongly advise you to reconsider. Miss Palmer's counter evidence is substantial." "I look forward to reviewing it, all of it." Charlotte referred to an assistant who distributed thick folders to everyone present. I opened mine to find dozens of pages, emails taken out of context, performance metrics selectively presented, statements from team members that had clearly been carefully edited. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my own stack of folders, one for each person at the table. "What's this?" Charlotte asked as I passed them around. "Context," I replied simply. The folders I'd prepared all night contained the complete versions of the emails Iris had excerpted, the full performance metrics showing our department's consistent growth, and most importantly, notarized statements from team members who had come to my home after Howie spread the word. Bella was the first to speak. She told me Mona was being pushed into early retirement, that I should distance myself if I wanted to advance. "She said the same to me," Penn added, "that there was a confidential performance issue with Mona that she couldn't discuss, but we should align with new leadership." "She played us against each other," Howie said. "Told each of us that the others had concerns about Mona's management." The lawyer's face reddened. "These statements are clearly coerced." "Each one given freely with witnesses present," I cut in. Charlotte was studying the folders intently. "This still doesn't address Miss Palmer's core claim that your file on her previous company is vindictive fabrication." "No, it doesn't," I agreed calmly. "For that, we need outside verification." I stood and walked to the door, opening it to reveal a man in his 50s wearing a visitor badge. "This is Edward Torres," I introduced him. "Former chief financial officer at Iris's previous company." The lawyer jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous. We weren't informed of additional witnesses." Edward took a seat beside me. "I was terminated 3 months before the company collapsed after raising concerns about suspicious strategy shifts. When Mona contacted me yesterday with the patterns she'd identified, I recognized them immediately." Charlotte leaned forward. "Mr. Torres, are you claiming Miss Palmer deliberately undermined your company?" "I'm stating that the strategies she advocated for were identical to the ones that bankrupted us, despite multiple warnings about their long-term consequences, and that she received a substantial consulting fee from the investment group that ultimately acquired our client list." The energy in the room shifted palpably. Gerald turned to Charlotte. "We need to involve our financial compliance team immediately." The lawyer was frantically texting. "My client rejects these baseless accusations." Edward smiled thinly. "Actually, I was offered a generous severance package in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement, which I did sign regarding the company itself. But that agreement doesn't prevent me from discussing individual employee actions, particularly when those actions might constitute financial impropriety." "Does Miss Palmer wish to respond to these allegations in person?" Charlotte asked the lawyer. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression falling. My client is unavailable at present. Then we'll proceed with a full investigation. Mr. Torres will need a formal statement. Already prepared, he replied, producing a sealed envelope along with documentation of the timeline and transactions. 2 weeks of investigation followed. I remained in limbo, neither terminated nor reinstated. The waiting was calculated, a common corporate strategy of delaying until momentum fades, until righteous anger cools. On Friday evening, Gerald arrived at my home looking uncomfortable. The investigation has stalled, he admitted. Blackstone Investment Group is applying significant pressure. They're threatening to withdraw financial support if we pursue this further. So Iris gets away with it, I stated flatly. Gerald winced. She won't be returning to the company, but we're prepared to offer a generous severance package. After he left, I didn't open his folder. Instead, I poured wine and returned to my garden, losing myself in nurturing living things. Edward Torres called as dusk fell. They're burying it, he said without preamble. I know. The investment group reached out to me, offered to refresh my recollection with a consulting contract. Are you taking it? He laughed bitterly. No, but it won't matter. They'll find someone who will. What will you do now? He finally asked. I looked at my garden, at the seeds I'd planted weeks ago now pushing through soil. I'm going to water my tomatoes, I replied. And then I'm going to finish what I started. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. Instead of staying home as instructed, I drove to the office dressed in my most confident suit. The security guard smiled and waved me through. Obviously, no one had removed my access. I walked directly to the executive floor where the board meeting would be held. Outside the boardroom, Charlotte was speaking quietly with Gerald and several board members. Gerald spotted me first, his expression shifting from shock to alarm. Mona, you're not supposed to be here. I know, I replied calmly. But I thought the board should have complete information before their vote. Miss Teller, this meeting is closed, Charlotte said. Of course, I just have one document to submit. I handed her a sealed envelope. This should clarify matters considerably. What is this? She asked. The missing piece. The reason I was so certain about Iris's connections to Blackstone Investment Group. You should open it now, all of you, I said. Something in my tone convinced them. Charlotte carefully broke the seal and removed a single page. The board members gathered around, reading over her shoulder. Their reactions told the story. Widened eyes, sharp intakes of breath, one man actually stepping backward. Is this verified? Charlotte asked, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. Every detail, I confirmed. I've spent the past 2 weeks securing additional documentation. Gerald looked physically ill. Why didn't you present this initially? Because I needed to see how far certain parties would go to protect their interests. Now I know. The board needs to review this immediately in private, Charlotte said. I nodded and turned to leave. Mona, Gerald called after me. Where are you going? I smiled for the first time in weeks. To clean out my desk. I won't be needing it anymore. As I walked away, I heard the boardroom door open and urgent voices calling for immediate legal counsel. By noon, news had spread throughout the company. Blackstone Investment Group wasn't just a financial partner. It was a complex shell corporation, ultimately controlled by our main competitor, Titan Marketing. Iris hadn't been sabotaging her previous employer for personal gain. She'd been a planted operative, executing a sophisticated corporate espionage strategy spanning years, designed to weaken and eventually acquire our client base through manufactured business failures. The evidence revealed an entire network of placed executives across multiple companies, all working toward the same goal: the systematic dismantling of competitive barriers through failures disguised as market forces. My phone rang continuously. Reporters, board members, regulatory officials. I declined all calls, focusing instead on packing my few remaining personal items. The investment group's representatives just left in a hurry, Darlene reported, appearing at my desk. Security escorted them out. Gerald's called an emergency all-staff meeting for 3 p.m., and there are people from the Securities Exchange Commission in the conference room. Everyone's saying you saved the company, that you discovered a conspiracy no one else saw. She continued. I closed my box. I just paid attention, Darlene. That's all. Are you really leaving? I picked up my box. My work here is done. As I walked toward the exit, my team gathered, forming an impromptu guard of honor. Howie stepped forward. Where will you go? I've received several interesting offers, I replied with a small smile. Turns out, exposing corporate espionage makes one rather marketable. Outside, the spring air felt fresh and cleansing. I placed my box in my car and took one last look at the building where I'd spent most of my adult life. My revenge wasn't getting Iris fired or exposing Blackstone's scheme. It wasn't even protecting the company from a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. My revenge was walking away on my own terms, with my reputation not just intact, but enhanced. While Iris faced potential criminal charges and Blackstone scrambled to avoid regulatory penalties, I had multiple job offers from companies who suddenly recognized the value of someone who noticed patterns others missed. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's rising so far above them that they become irrelevant to your story.